Every freaking kid in the classroom raised their hand. And of course, I look over at that headmistress and I'm like, you know.
Marc Brackett says the problem isn't that boys don't want to talk about emotions. It's that adults often build environments where they can't. This clip shows what changes when a classroom finally gives them permission.
We're kind of early to the gym culture, you know, so maybe my lens on that is a little distorted. There's something interesting around this notion of sissy showing emotion and boys. And earlier we were talking about the movie Stand By Me, movie I absolutely love. I think it's just like a perfect story. It's a Stephen King story, right? Turned into a movie. I think Rob Reiner wrote that movie.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that movie is the transition because that happens right around puberty and between it's right before junior high school, it's between junior high and high school. I can't remember. Some transition, and the kids are at different developmental stages. I feel like this is a big part of it, where, like, let's say a kid is a little bit more emotional, a little more coddled at home, perhaps. I'm making a lot of assumptions here, and cries in front of a group of boys when you're in the 7th or 8th grade. Some of those boys are because of their stage of maturation, they're not really little kids anymore. They're like, dude, what are you doing? And then you've mixed all those kids together, and because of the way that schools and social dynamics are, that can stay with a kid for a long time. Like being sort of having an emotional expression, that can stick with you for like 2-3 years of school, right? So I feel like some of this stuff comes about that way, which is very different than like just, I guess, like a hypothetical scenario, an adult male in the business place. Maybe he's new at, where things tend to equalize a bit in terms of maturational stage. And so these are two different things: boys crying versus young men crying versus quote unquote grown men crying.
Again, this is all nurture. So if you go to schools that do our work, I just interviewed a bunch of teenage boys, actually. It blows your mind. They have a whole different perception of emotion. I ask them these questions about men and boys, and and their responses are like, huh? Like, what's wrong with crying? Like, if you feel like crying, you cry. Like, are you sure? Even
no ridicule.
No ridicule. I said, well, what if you get into a fight? Can you talk to the kid about what happened and tell them how you felt when they left you out? And they're like, of course, that's how we grew up.
We're seeing that boys' emotional behavior can look completely different when a school treats emotion as a skill, not a weakness.
That's how we grew up. But they grew up in a school that took emotion seriously. They gave them the skills and the resources to do it. It reminds me, actually, I never forget this, since we're on this topic of boys and men, I was in the beginning of my career doing training in emotional regulation in London, outside of London, a very kind of rough and tough neighborhood. And the head mistress, as they call it back then, of the school, she looked at me and she's like, you know something, Mark? This program's going to turn the boys into homosexuals. I'm like, okay, where'd that come from? I'm thinking to myself, you need a lot more training than just emotional intelligence, but I'll put that aside for a minute. Anyhow, I said, I'm here. So can we just go and do it? Let me demonstrate it. Not a problem. We go like a fishbowl. Here I am, like the teacher in the middle of the room. I have 25 teachers around me and 20 kids in the middle. And I start sharing a story about my life, whatever it was. I was about probably feeling discouraged. I think it was when I first got into the martial arts, it was tough. I was not a tough boy, and I was afraid of my shadow, and I had all this bullying and abuse, and going to a karate studio, it was a big shock for me. I happened to have an amazing teacher who transformed my life and became a career of mine, martial arts. Anyhow, I told a story about that, about how I failed my yellow belt, and I just hated myself. And not only was I bullied, but I couldn't even get a freaking yellow belt, discouraged, hopeless. And everybody's looking at me like, where's this going? The teachers, the kids were glued. They loved hearing the story. And then I said, I'm just curious. Has anyone else ever felt the way I felt?
That raised hand moment matters because it turns the debate from theory into proof that the need was already there.
Ever felt the way I felt? And I said, just raise your hand if you've had that kind of feeling. Every freaking kid in the classroom raised their hand. And of course I look over at that headmistress and I'm like, let's talk later. Kids are dying to express their emotions, boys and girls. We've just socialized it. And the socialization piece is really important because even the way fathers talk to their boy children, is different. It's the toughen up, it's da-da-da. They use more feeling words with girls than with boys. We're not born that way. We are socialized into, having these complicated relationships with certain emotions. But it's not something that can't be modified with good instruction.
You're saying this, I'm realizing I internalized so many things that skew my perspective on this. I guess I should say I'm relieved to hear that expression of emotions among boys is more accepted now. I think that's
the generation that's going through this work. The kids who are growing up in places that are not taking emotion seriously are growing up with a more stereotypical way of viewing it. It's got to be infused into your life. You got to have these conversations. You got to be in situations where, like in our work, just to give you an example, like we're really rigorous about teaching this stuff. This isn't just sort of like kumbaya sitting in a circle. Right. This is like, all right, everyone, we've got a problem here. There's, the Gaga pit, which is in these, this thing in schools. There's a kid who nobody is, allowing to participate. That kid feels awful. What's our obligation? What are we supposed to do to handle that? Imagine you're that kid. Imagine you're the one that nobody wants to be, part of the game. Now we're going to get into groups and we're going to think about A, what are the feelings? B, what are the solutions? What do you do for yourself? What do you do for the other person? And it's like rigorous conversations around the techniques, and they got to role play it. And then we ask questions about the role play. It's like, well, what if it goes wrong? What happens if you say this? And they say, go blank yourself. What do you do then? And that's the kind of complex, muscle building we're giving kids in terms of dealing with emotions.
As many of you know, I've been taking AG1 for nearly 15 years now. I discovered it way back in 2012, long before I ever had a podcast, and I've been taking it every day since. The reason I started taking it, and the reason I still take it, is because AG1 is, to my knowledge, the highest quality and most comprehensive of the foundational nutritional supplements on the market. It combines vitamins, minerals, prebiotics, probiotics, and adaptogens into a single scoop that's easy to drink, and it tastes great. It's designed to support things like gut health, immune health, and overall energy, and it does so by helping to fill any gaps you might have in your daily nutrition. Now, of course, everyone should strive to eat nutritious whole foods. I certainly do that every day. But I'm often asked if you could take just one supplement, what would that supplement be? And my answer is always AG1, because it has just been oh so critical to supporting all aspects of my physical health, mental health, and performance. I know this from my own experience with AG1, and I continually hear this from other people who use AG1 daily. If you would like to try AG1, you can go to drinkag1.com/Huberman to get a special offer. For a limited time, AG1 is giving away 6 free travel packs of AG1 and a bottle of vitamin D3 K2 with your subscription. Again, that's drinkag1 with the numeral 1.com/Huberman to get 6.
If boys are taught emotional regulation this directly, do you think it changes school culture long term? Leave your take in the comments and like and subscribe for more clips like this.